If you've spent years playing classical music, I have some good news. You probably already know 80 to 90% of the skills you need to know to improvise in jazz. Seriously, the problem isn't that you don't know enough skills, is that nobody has shown you how jazz musicians actually use them. In this video, I'll show you the jazz scales you're already familiar with and how to start improvising with them today. My name is Shannon Gunn. Welcome to the Jazz Improv Institute. And please, if this is helpful to you, like, subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications whenever I put out a new video. If you've ever opened a jazz improvisation book and immediately seen pages full of altered scales, diminished scales, whole tone scales, bebop scales, and modes with intimidating names, it's easy to think maybe I'm just missing years of theory. But that's not true. So let's simplify things a bit. First and foremost, the major scale is still king in most jazz music. You've played it thousands of times. You know your C major scale, your B flat major scale, your E flat scale, so on and so forth. Nothing changes about the scale. The difference is how jazz musicians think about it. Instead of, I'm playing a scale, they're thinking, I'm hearing chordal tones while connecting them with scale notes. So for example, over a C major 7 chord, you could play the C major scale. It works fine, but you could also play a C Lydian with a sharp 4, and that would also work over a C major scale. As you're playing that, you're going to want to emphasize the chordal tones, 1, 3, 5, and 7. So if you can do that while you play, it sounds much more like jazz than simply just running the scale up and down. And one way that we utilize the major scale but emphasize the chordal tones is by adding a note to the scale. This is called the bebop scale. I have another video on that, so I'm going to explain that in detail elsewhere. So another scale you already know is the pentatonic. And so you've probably played the pentatonic in orchestral excerpts or in a band, maybe in your warm-ups. So jazz musicians love pentatonics because they sound melodic immediately. So instead of having to worry about like what note fits within the chord, you're just working with 5 notes and they fit a lot of chords. And so that makes it much easier. So here's a fun exercise. So you could play a C major scale. Now only use those 5 notes to make little musical ideas. Don't think the scale. Think more along the lines of sentences. And go up, go down. There's all different things that you can do in order to be able to utilize that scale. So another scale you already recognize is the blues scale. And it's really just a minor pentatonic with a sharp 4, 1 extra note. That single note creates so much character. It says, hey, I'm playing the blues. This is usually the sound people are expecting, and you don't need to complicate it. You can just put on a blues backing track, start experimenting with the minor pentatonic scale over that, and start adding notes in between. All right, now I want to talk a little bit about Dorian mode. So I teach Dorian because I want to open people up right away to improvisation, and it's just the second mode of the major scale. That's super easy for people to learn and understand. And if that's confusing to you, just like, for example, play a C major scale, then start on D and play D to D using the notes of the C major scale. That's D Dorian. It's really actually quite simple. Now, it's a very common sound in more of a later form of jazz. So I don't spend a lot of time on it, and I definitely do not want it to be an absolute. Minor is its whole separate world, because you can do Dorian, but you also have some options in terms of the melodic minors and the harmonic minors. But whenever you see a minor chord, if you're first starting out and you're a classical musician, perhaps consider looking at any minor chord as basically the same thing as the tonic below it, and then playing that tonic scale over that minor chord, starting on the note of the minor chord. That just sort of simplifies things, and it's the essence of the 2-5-1 tonicization that we're going to be working on later on. Here's what surprised me when I started learning jazz. Professional jazz musicians don't spend every solo thinking about what exotic scale should I use. Most of the time, they're thinking about the melody, knowing kind of the tonicization, which is based off the chordal tones, understanding and listening to the rhythm section while they play and making it like a conversation, and focusing on phrasing. They're focusing on creating interesting ideas. The scales provide some available notes to sort of like fill in between. But in the end, the mindset shift is around thinking about the music as a conversation as opposed to a stringent, like step one, step two, play this, then that. So here's your practice challenge. Choose one backing track. Just use one scale. So I have a whole bunch of what are called 2-5 chord flows, 2-chord flows, which is the minor 2 to the dominant chord. So look at that as a 2-5, play the parent scale over that whole backing track. Figure out what you think sounds good and try to play within the changes using that parent scale. So that is an exercise that you can do, and I'll link it up. I need to create a playlist. I'll create a playlist and I'll link up the playlist of all my 2-chord flows. I also have all of those as PDFs along with the backing tracks in the vault of the Jazz Improv Institute on School. It is a yearly membership right now to access that, but it's all laid out for you if you're interested in that. So when you're doing the 2-chord flows, just use the major scale one day. Next day, try doing the major pentatonic over it. The next day, try to do a blues scale. That's it. No fancy theory, no altered scales yet. See how many different musical ideas you can create, and you'll be amazed how much music is already inside of what you already know. Final thoughts. One of the biggest myths in jazz education is that you need to memorize hundreds of scales before you're allowed to improvise. You don't. In fact, the best improvisers often do more with fewer notes. So instead of learning another 10 scales this week, learn to make one familiar scale sound musical. Focus on one thing and master it. That's where you will start to sound like a pro. So if you're a classical musician who's trying to learn jazz without feeling overwhelmed, I created a free 7-day course for you. It's called 7 Days from Classical to Jazz. And inside, I'll walk you through the first steps to becoming a confident improviser one day at a time. You'll also get access to our free Jazz Improv community on School, where you can ask questions and keep making progress. The links are in the description below, and if you found this video helpful, please give it a like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments which one of these scales surprised you the most. I'll see you in the next video. Happy practicing.